So we're actually talking with you on the 9th of August. That's the day in 1999 when President Yeltsin announced that this man will be his successor in the Kremlin, will be the next president of Russia. And I can tell you that that announcement was generally met with laughter, because most people never heard of Vladimir Putin. He rose through the ranks of the KGB, which then became the FSB, the main domestic security service. He was never in public politics. He never ran for any public office in his life. The first public office he ran for was for the president of Russia. So when President Yeltsin announced that this man was to become the new prime minister and his successor in the Kremlin, the main response to that was laughter. And what happened after that, in the next few weeks and months after Putin's appointment as prime minister and his designation as President Yeltsin's chosen successor, we had a series of mysterious apartment bombings throughout Russia, in which more than 300 people died, and which were blamed on Chechen terrorists, which then served as a pretext for Mr. Putin to launch a military campaign in Chechnya, massive bombardment campaign, sending in federal troops, which was the main backdrop to the transfer of power in Russia at the end of 1999, the beginning of 2000. So they were helped by the television channels that were under their control. That at that time we still had independent television in Russia. So they did not yet have the monopoly on television, the government. But they had enough. They had enough power in the media to kind of project this image of Putin as a strong man, strong leader, somebody who defends Russian interest against aggression, against terrorism. And so this was the background against which this recently unknown individual got the most votes in the 2000 presidential election. And the big question remains, and it still remains today, whether Mr. Putin actually obtained the 50% necessary to win. And there are big doubts as to whether he actually did. And there was an investigation conducted by journalists from the Moscow Times at the time in 2000, which showed that there was enough election fraud and enough rewriting of voter protocols and tampering with voter data that the likelihood was that Mr. Putin did not actually receive the 50% result he needed to become president, but the officially announced result was that he did. But nevertheless, the election in 2000 was the last election, the last national election in Russia that at least resembled a democratic vote. Every election after 2000 was assessed by international monitors, by monitors from the Council of Europe and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, as not free and not fair. So for more than 17 years, Russian citizens have not had a chance to freely elect their own leaders, and I think it's also very important for people to remember that. It's a long debate, and I think it's a debate that will continue for a long time among historians as to why Vladimir Putin was chosen as the anointed successor by President Yeltsin. I certainly don't think it was a voluntary decision by Boris Yeltsin. I mean, Boris Yeltsin was somebody who personified and symbolized a free and democratic Russia. And by choosing the successor he did, he crossed out all his achievements, everything he had achieved in the previous decade. And it is well known, very well known, in fact, that Boris Yeltsin's preferred successor in the Kremlin was Boris Nemtsov, the governor of the Nizhny Novgorod region, who then became deputy prime minister of Russia under the Yeltsin presidency, and who then, of course, would go on to become the leader of the democratic opposition in Russia against Vladimir Putin, and who would be assassinated under the Kremlin walls in February of 2015. But Boris Yeltsin wanted Boris Nemtsov to become the next president of Russia. He actually expressed it publicly on several occasions, and I think just imagine what a different Russia and what a different world it would have been had Boris Nemtsov, not Vladimir Putin, become president of Russia back in the late 1990s.